I surrender. I wasn't going to do a video about this, but because I've received so many comments and questions about it on older videos on the channel, we'll talk about the tragedy on the set of Rust. I'm Dustin and you're watching Guns of the West. Now, the reason I had previously decided not to talk about this is because something as tragic as what happened on the set of the movie Rust doesn't really fit the normal theme of this fun educational channel, and so I wasn't going to talk about it. But you know, if we can learn something about safety, and if we can learn something about the gun that was used so that we can understand not to fear the gun, then it is worth talking about. Now, to start out, why don't we just take a look at Alec Baldwin's statement that he recently gave to ABC about what happened.
Now in this scene, I'm going to cock the gun. And I said, do you want to see that? And she said, yes. So I take the gun and I start to cock the gun. I'm not going to pull the trigger. I said, do you see that? She goes, well, just cheat it down and tilt it down a little bit like that. And I cock the gun. I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
And just a moment or so later, he also said this.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
Now, I believe what he's telling us there is false. Now, does that mean that he's outright lying to us, or was he in so much shock that he really remembers it happening the way he said it did, even though it didn't? I don't know. This video is not a bash Alec Baldwin video. This is a what can we learn video. Now, why do I think it's false? I think he pulled the trigger. I'm very confident that he did. This is the same model of gun that was used in that scene there. This one might have a longer barrel. This is the cavalry version of it, but it's the Colt Single Action Army. This particular one is an Italian reproduction made by a company called Pieta, imported by a company called Cimarron, so it has both names on it. And the only reason I mention that is because very often in Hollywood movies, they also use guns like the Cimarron reproductions. Mechanically, they're exactly the same as the Colt, so what I'm about to show you would be true even if he did use a Colt. Now, on this gun, it is a single action revolver. So the hammer gets cocked back manually and then the trigger releases it. With the hammer down, the trigger actually does nothing. The trigger only performs a single action of releasing the trigger. Now, he says he never did pull the trigger. He said there that his finger was never on the trigger, that he just pulled the hammer partially back, and then just before it was cocked, he let it go. But I just let it go and it doesn't go forward. Let me show you something here. If I start to pull this back just a little bit, you'll hear a click. Now right there, there's a little safety feature that the hammer can no longer go all the way down. There's a little gap between the hammer and the frame. Now Colt did say that back in 1873 that is a flawed design, but that doesn't mean that just me releasing it with my thumb is going to fire the gun. I haven't really put much pressure on the spring. There's not really much force there. Now if something were to hit it very hard, then it could go off. I've done videos about that before. I'll put links to them down in the description. Now let's go on. As I pull the hammer back just a little farther, I want you to watch the cylinder right here and watch how it begins to rotate immediately. Now, even if this went forward, it still won't. We still have the gap, but the cylinder moved. The cartridge of ammunition that was in front of the hammer and the firing pin is not there anymore. Even if the hammer went all the way down, there's nothing to set off. Let's keep going and see what happens if I go a little farther. I can go to the half-cock position. The next click, if I let go, it stays right there. And the cylinder is still out of place. If I come back to 3/4, you'll hear another click. Now if I let go, it'll go back to half-cock, but not all the way down to set off the gun. And if I come back a little farther, it'll still go back to half-cock. And if I come back all the way, watch the cylinder. Now the cylinder has put another chamber in line, but if I let go of the hammer, it stays at the full cock position. The only thing that can make it fire is if I do pull the trigger like that. The other thing that he may have done, he may have had his finger pulling the trigger all the time. He may have just been gripping the gun like that. And then if the hammer is let go at any point, then yes, it does go all the way down. Now we still have the issue of there's not a cartridge necessarily lined up, but he may have done that. Either way, the trigger is pulled. I really don't think it's likely that something was so mechanically broken that all of the clicks failed and it went all the way down on a gun that was supposedly inspected by an armorer. So the trigger was pulled. This gun is not something that should be afraid of. His statement, I think, makes it sound like the gun is just inherently dangerous. Now, I'm not saying guns are just completely non-dangerous. We have to be very careful with them, of course. But this is not more dangerous than anything else. When handled properly, it's just fine. I think this is a good opportunity to review gun safety rules. I always like to teach and go by the NRA's 3 basic gun safety rules. Rule number 1, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Rule number 2, always keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target and you've made the decision to fire. Rule number 3, always keep the gun unloaded until ready for use. Now that number 3 brings me to another thought. Why was there live ammunition on this movie set? There should never be live ammunition when you're filming a movie, pointing guns at each other, using blanks and things. A lot of things went wrong. There was a lot of irresponsible decision making going on and a lot of safety steps getting skipped for this to happen. Like I said, Mr. Baldwin's statement makes it seem like the gun was just dangerous and just went off when he took his his thumb off the hammer. That's not how it works. Doesn't work that way. He pulled the trigger on a live round and it fired. The gun did exactly what it's supposed to do. He didn't. And it sounds like neither did the armor, or neither did anybody that was working around these guns on that set. But the gun, again, don't fear the gun. Even these old style ones, perfectly fine when used correctly. And I always like to think of a statement John Wayne gave when he did a gun safety video for the Arizona, I think it was their Fish and Wildlife Department for hunter education type of a thing. And just take a listen to this.
Used wrong, it can be very ugly. Used properly, it can bring you enjoyment all your life.
That's exactly how I feel about them too. When they're used right, like he said, they can bring you enjoyment. We collect and use these things for so many things: hunting, recreation, fun with the family, and even self-defense if it came to it. But if they're not used properly, in other words, if we mess up, that's when there can be a problem. It's not the gun, it's the human. Well, I hope this was helpful, especially for all those who've been asking me about what happened on the set. I wasn't there, but that's my take on it. Please don't forget to click that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos. And if you look in the description, you'll see where to find me on social media, as well as where to find great Guns of the West products. Thank you so much for watching.